Today in Kyiv, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said what we expected from the Big Ten countries willing to send troops to Ukraine. He said Canada may also send peacekeepers to Ukraine. At the same time, he confirmed billions in aid and discussed joint drone production. Canada and Ukraine may produce them together. And in the same footage, you can see Trump's special envoy, Kit Kellogg, who was also present in Kyiv today and delivered his message from the Americans. That's why in this episode we're going to break down exactly what Carney promised. What does the deployment of Canadian troops to Ukraine after the peace mean? Why does Kyiv need this and how will it work? You know, it just throws away this Russian idea of guarantees with veto power. I'll give you a spoiler. Today, Lavrov said the Kremlin recognizes Zelensky as Ukraine's leader, but new nuances have emerged. So what are we going to talk about? Let's break down the literal formulas of Carney and Zelensky. As the press notes, this means the statement by the Prime Minister of Canada that they do not rule out sending Canadian troops to Ukraine. What about military and financial aid? Why is Kyiv discussing joint drone production with Canada? Why is Kit Kellogg present in Kyiv today? Where do Europe and the United States stand on providing security guarantees like NATO Charter Article 5? Overall, the episode will be lengthy and full of events. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today, August 24th, is Independence Day of our Ukraine. Let's go through this step by step. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So, I'll start the episode with a key phrase. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, was in Kyiv today and stated, "We do not rule out the participation of Canadian military personnel as part of an international security mission for Ukraine." And now for the context after the peace agreement is signed. And this is fundamental. So, it's not about troops right now, but about the security structure after the war. Today, Carney stood next to Zelensky at the celebration of Ukraine's Independence Day. And interestingly, Trump's special envoy, Kit Kellogg, was also present in the hall. All this was said publicly in Kyiv. And now Canadian and international publications are breaking down the formula that was announced today. Mark Carney reports. When asked about the troops, Carney replied that he would not rule it out. Global News writes that Carney does not rule out that Canadian troops will be part of the mission. There's no sentimentality about financial or military aid. For example, Reuters reports that over 1 billion Canadian dollars from previously announced aid has been confirmed. For viewers, deliveries aren't delayed by negotiations and are on schedule. They are also discussing joint drone production to reduce Ukraine's reliance on external supplies, warehouses, and licenses. It's not just about having more hardware, it's about having their own production and technological autonomy. What did Zelensky say? He sticks to the same line, and that's right. Zelensky said, quote, "We need guarantees like those in Article 5 of the NATO Charter. Not just paperwork, but automatic protection. The key to understanding the structure is not NATO membership itself, but the impact of Article 5 of the NATO Charter. If peace is broken, arms supplies, air defense, and sanctions would be triggered automatically without coordination or veto rights for the aggressor. That's what a security guarantee like Article 5 of the NATO Charter means." Why was Kit Kellogg in Kyiv? The presence of Trump's special envoy isn't just a guest, it's a bridge to the American bloc of guarantees. The United States doesn't want to send its troops right now, but they're discussing a post-war mission and aerial reconnaissance support, as well as coordination of European contingents. Keith Kellogg confirmed this today. Kellogg is in Kyiv, appearing on camera with Mark Carney and Volodymyr Zelensky. This signals synchronized positions and is crucial. I'll simply explain why Kyiv needs this formula. When Moscow, via Lavrov, claims security guarantees for Ukraine without Russia are a dead end, they really want veto power over military aid to Ukraine after a peace deal. Mark Carney, with his statement that he does not rule out sending Canadian military personnel and his talk about a post-war mission, is simply breaking this maneuver. The decision to deploy or have any military mission present will be made by the coalition of countries, not by the Kremlin. That's the bottom line. This again is in line with European logic, meaning the automatic reinstatement of sanctions and arms supplies in the event of any violation of the ceasefire. About drones separately, joint production is no longer just some public relations campaign, it's insurance against bureaucracy. When decisions about long-range strikes have to go through approval in Washington and Brussels, having your own drones and missiles means freedom. Listen, you don't need to wait for permission or not. Mark Carney, by confirming the allocation of funds and the creation of joint facilities, is objectively speeding up the so-called Ukrainian long arm, long-range strike. This is needed for deterrence and maintaining peace. The more long-range weapons Ukraine has, the better the peace agreement will look the day after it is signed. And one more important point, it's not the first time for Canada. Their military was already stationed on NATO's eastern flank, and their instructors worked with Ukraine's armed forces before the full-scale invasion. Now they're simply translating this into the language of post-war architecture. And yes, in this case, the phrase, "we do not rule it out," really matters. This is a policy of doors open just enough so that Moscow can't slam them shut with its veto power, which it is trying to impose on us. So Mark Carney's visit to Kyiv is not just a courtesy call, no. So, we've heard the European position on security guarantees and the peace agreement, we've heard the same position from the Americans, and now we've heard Canada's position. This is the kind of package that Mark Carney announced today, saying that he does not rule out troops as part of a peacekeeping mission. Money then. He clearly stated how much they are willing to spend on supplying weapons to Ukraine and on joint production of drones. And of course, in addition to that, Kit Kellogg is also present, which shows that Canada is not acting on its own, but in coordination with everyone else. All of this leads us to a simple point. Even if negotiations drag on, post-war security is already being put together right now. And so that no one at the table has the right, to simply exclude Ukraine from protection with just one move. That's why this visit is very important. I went over it briefly. And finally, I'll add one important point. When our Western partners work clearly and purposefully and don't pay attention to the whining from Moscow, suddenly Moscow officials start trying to change their rhetoric. Notice how the Kremlin is shouting, "No security guarantees for Ukraine. What are you doing over there in the West?" The West keeps working, dismissing concerns. Lavrov says, "Without guarantees from Russians, this leads nowhere." The Europeans say, yeah, okay, and continue. Then what? Today, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow recognizes Volodymyr Zelensky as Ukraine's de facto leader and is willing to meet with him. However, he will not be signing any documents. No, we recognize him as the regime's de facto head and are prepared to meet with him in that role. At the same time, he again raised the issue of Zelensky's alleged illegitimacy, stating that the signatories of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs must be a legitimate person. When it comes to signing legal documents, everyone must have a clear understanding that the person signing is legitimate. Under Ukraine's constitution, Zelensky is currently not that person. Lavrov, monster, disappear. Who are you? They didn't bring you any oaths today. Why are you meddling? To the constitution of Ukraine. Also, according to Lavrov, Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky, but as before, he once again started repeating about his illegitimacy. Putin is ready to meet with him, but no, we can't meet just to take a photo and give him the opportunity to claim that he is legitimate. Legitimacy is a separate issue. Regardless of when this meeting might take place, the question is who will sign the document from the Ukrainian side. Well, you get the idea, but what's interesting here? Interestingly, when ignored, Lavrov suddenly asks, so do we basically recognize Zelensky de facto? Well, if you ignore these Russians whining for a few more weeks, it seems like they'll end up recognizing Zelensky's legitimacy too. Because just yesterday he was shouting, "What, are you serious? Putin meeting with Zelensky? We will never recognize him as anyone at all." Now they're already recognizing him, but not completely. Well, that's already good progress. In general, I'll leave it at that. Share your opinion and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now.